Have you ever came across when you're desperately wanting to come up with some new ideas and get stuck? No matter how hard you try, you just can't. But when you get up and go for a walk, a quick bathroom break, even take a shower or a dump, and all of a sudden, some great ideas spring up into your head. Well, this is because our brains have two different modes of thinking, the focus mode and the diffuse mode. This is what Barbara Oakley, an engineering professor from Oakley University, who is a phenomenal name in learning, has said in one of her most famous courses online, Learning How to Learn. Oh yeah, by the way, did I tell you? She's also a writer for many bestsellers like A Mind for Numbers.
What do you do when you just can't figure something out? For zombies, it's pretty simple. They can just keep bashing their brains against the wall. But living brains are a lot more complex. It turns out, though, that if you understand just a little bit of some of the basics about how your brain works, you can learn more easily and be less frustrated.
Usually, when we're working on a problem, we need to have the two modes of thinking to come into play, the focus mode and the diffuse mode.
Researchers have found that we have two fundamentally different modes of thinking. Here, I'll call them the focused and the diffuse modes.
Let us get acquainted with the focus mode. In this mode of thinking is when our concentration is fully put to use. The same neural patterns will be initiated. Quite on the contrary from the focus mode is the diffuse mode of thinking, which is a more relaxed state of thinking. In this mode, new neural thought patterns will be created and put to use.
We're familiar with focusing. It's when you concentrate intently on something you're trying to learn or to understand. But we're not so familiar with diffuse thinking. Turns out that this more relaxed thinking style is related to a set of neural resting states.
Barbara uses an analogy of a pinball machine to help explain these two modes of thinking.
We're going to use an analogy of the game of pinball to help us understand these two thinking modes. If you remember, a pinball game works by you pull back on the plunger, release it, and a ball goes boinking out, bouncing around on the rubber bumpers, and that's how you get points. So, here's your brain with the ears right here and the eyes looking upwards, and we can lay that pinball machine right down inside it. So there you go.
She described the focus mode of thinking as if in a pinball machine where there are bumpers lying so closely together that when we think a thought, it goes through those narrow channels directly.
For the focus mode, the blue rubber bumpers here are placed very close to one another. See the orange pattern here towards the top? It represents a familiar thought pattern. You think a thought, boom, it takes off, moves smoothly along, and then as it's bouncing around on the bumpers, you're able to figure out the problem you're trying to solve.
In an opposite scenario, if we were facing new problems or something we've never done before, then what you need to use is the diffuse mode of thinking.
But what if the problem you're working on needs new ideas or approaches, concepts you haven't thought of before? That's symbolized here by this neural pattern towards the bottom of the pinball machine area. But if you haven't thought that thought before, you don't even know how that pattern feels or where it is. To get to this new thought pattern, you need a different way of thinking, and that's represented here by the diffuse mode. Look at how widely spaced the rubber bumpers are. Thought takes off. Look at how it moves widely, bounces around. It can travel a long way before being interrupted by hitting a bumper. In this diffuse mode of thinking, you can look at things broadly from a very different big picture perspective.
In this mode of thinking, our thoughts can travel much more freely. When we relax, the environment of our brain can be compared to the pinball bumpers that are lying around much more loosely to one another. Our thoughts in this mode will be able to move itself in a much more wider space along the pathways, making connections for new neural patterns. In learning, it is crucial to use these two modes alternately.
Now, as far as neuroscientists know right now, you're either in the focus mode or the diffuse mode of thinking. It seems you can't be in both thinking modes at the same time. It's kind of like a coin. You can see either one side or the other side of the coin, but not both sides at the same time. Being in one mode seems to limit your access to the other mode's way of thinking.
Brains have two different modes of thinking, the focus mode and the diffuse mode. When your brain is thinking about something that it's used to, you'll be able to get a deeper understanding of what you already know. In this type of thinking, the same neural pathways will be used over and over, and this becomes like a blockage to new neural pathways to being created. Hence, the reason why you get stuck. Your brain in this focus mode of thinking will make you look at things from the same point of view, making you unable to see it from a different perspective. Because your brain didn't take a break to wander off to other parts of your new neural networks, this is also the scientific reason why Steve Jobs likes to take his long walks. In order for creativity, you must permit your mind to wander off to wherever it may go. Way up high or down low, it'll go wherever it will go. Your brain in this diffuse mode of thinking will try to make random connections in different areas so that new ideas can be created. Steve Jobs, the late co-founder of Apple, was known for his walking meetings, and he quoted that creativity is just like connecting dots, but how? By letting your mind wander. It'll go wherever it will go. For supporting this argument, there was a research done by the Stanford University. They found that a person's creative output increases by 60% when they're walking. It'll go wherever it will go. Here, we'll see how two famous figures in history have used the diffuse thinking modes to create their world-renowned works. Salvador Dali, an artist, and Thomas Edison, a scientist. Salvador Dali, a peculiar individual who is a talented surrealist painter of the 20th century known for his famous painting, The Persistence of Memory. He used the diffuse mode to spark new ideas for when creating his painting. What he would do is, as he sits in his chair and in one hand he would be dangling his keys, and as he relaxes, about to fall asleep, the keys would fall from his hand, waking him up with a loud clanking noise as it hits the plate. When he wakes up, he would take these new ideas he got in the diffuse thinking modes back to working on them in the focus mode. Using a similar method, Thomas Edison, an inventor of his time, father of the light bulbs, what he would do is he would hold a ball in his hand, and as he relaxes, the ball would fall from his hand, and when he wakes up, he would take those thoughts back to work. So, how could we use these two modes of thinking in our daily lives? Well, when you're in the focus mode and you think a thought, the familiar thought pattern comes into play. This is when you're doing a task that you're used to or have done before. In this mode, when you're doing familiar activities, you'll be able to put your brain to full power use. You can deepen the knowledge that you already know to greater depths. Let us take for example, if you're learning how to play the guitar, you'll start off from learning the easy familiar chords, how you place your fingers and muscle movements for each chord. Then, as you practice new harder chords, ones you never played before, you might need to take a rest so that your brain is at ease into the diffuse mode, so that it can connect those new learnings. Playing a new song means that you might start off by listening to that particular song and start to play the chords in chunks, connecting many chunks together until you eventually play the whole song. As you practice more and more, you'll be able to play that song more fluently and accurately. Your brain will start to connect the dots, forming new neural patterns. In another real-life example is when cooking. In the focus mode, if you're cooking a dish that you make every day, you might not need to look at the recipe. Making this dish often, you already have memorized the steps in the recipe. You can make this dish fast in no time. But what if you want a new idea for creating a new dish? To make something even more special. Something special for that special someone. You try to experiment with what you already know, but just get stuck. You can't think of anything new. What you might want to try is take a break. Have some coffee, munch on snacks. This might help you come up with great new ideas for that new dish. So remember, if you get stuck, go for a walk. Have a break, find something else to do, then come back to what you were doing. Key takeaway. When we're learning something new or solving a problem, our brains has two different modes of thinking, the focus mode and the diffuse mode. Focus mode is when you give your full concentration when learning something new or solving a problem. Our brain will search for connections of what we already know, in the same way which we are familiar with. Diffuse mode. After we have given our full concentration to what we're trying to learn or solve, and when we relax or find something else to do, our brains are still working in the background to make those connections. These new ideas we get are from the diffuse mode of thinking. When to use this? For learning new things, solving a new problem, coming up with new ideas. How to use this? 1. Focus intently on what you're trying to learn or solve. 2. Relax, take a break, find something else to do. 3. Switch between steps 1 and 2. Note, just like Barb says, what neuroscientists knows right now is that we're either in the focus mode or diffuse mode. We're not able to be in both modes at the same time. We need to switch back and forth between these two modes. Thinking without giving your brain a break to create new neural connections will allow you to only think with what you already know. Eventually, will lead to getting stuck.